The dude abides. The Big Lebowski wasn't just a quirky comedy about bowling, mistaken identity, and a rug that really tied the room together. It was a surreal collision of genres, philosophies, and filmmaking chaos that turned into one of the greatest cult films of all time. Beneath the slacker humor and bizarre kidnappings, the Coen Brothers staged a production filled with clashing egos, risky improvisations, subtle symbolism, and hidden nods that even the sharpest fans miss. Today, we're revealing 20 hidden details you never noticed about The Big Lebowski, from casting clashes and obsessive prop design to dangerous stunts and unexpected cultural impact. And at the end, a bonus fact so strange, it feels like something only the dude himself could dream up. Let's roll into it. The rug became a prop nightmare. That rug didn't just tie the room together. It nearly unraveled the production. The Coens wanted a very specific Persian design, something that looked valuable but not flashy. Their art department scoured Los Angeles rug shops, renting multiple look-alike rugs because continuity demanded the exact same model across shoots. Crew members recall constantly rolling and unrolling them, only for actors to spill drinks or ash cigarettes onto the fibers. Jeff Bridges reportedly joked, "This rug's gonna outlive us all." What audiences didn't know was how much labor and money went into keeping that rug camera ready. It wasn't just a set dressing, it became a symbol of obsessive attention to detail, mirroring the way the dude fixated on it. Jeff Bridges refused to act. He just was the dude. Jeff Bridges didn't approach the role of Jeffrey Lebowski as a performance. Instead, he blurred the line between actor and character. Before each scene, he'd ask the Coens, "Did the dude burn one before this?" If the answer was yes, he'd rub his eyes to make them look bloodshot. Bridges even borrowed clothes from his own closet, like those jelly sandals and ratty t-shirts. "That's my stuff, man," he later admitted. The dude wasn't crafted, he was lived. The uncanny realism shocked castmates, who often felt Bridges was just hanging out on set rather than working. That authenticity turned what could have been a caricature into a cultural archetype. A man so apathetic yet oddly zen that audiences saw both comedy and philosophy in him. Walter's Vietnam obsession came from John Goodman's father. Walter Sobchak, the short-tempered, gun-waving veteran, is unforgettable. But his obsession with Vietnam came from John Goodman's own life. Goodman revealed that his father, a World War II veteran, would constantly bring up the war during arguments, using it as a way to win debates. The Coens latched onto this and rewrote Walter's dialogue to mirror that obsessive behavior. Over the line, Market Zero suddenly wasn't just comedy, it was a dark commentary on how veterans carried trauma into everyday civilian squabbles. Goodman admitted he often thought of his dad when screaming Walter's lines, which explains the raw, terrifying believability. Walter isn't just a punchline. He's a portrait of how unresolved war scars echo in mundane settings like bowling alleys. Julianne Moore's accent was inspired by artists, not aristocrats. Maud Lebowski's bizarre, clipped accent feels like she wandered out of a British art gallery. But Julianne Moore revealed her inspiration wasn't nobility, it was conceptual artists she'd met in New York. Many of them spoke with theatrical intonations, almost parodying European sophistication. The Coens encouraged her to exaggerate this art world dialect, blending avant-garde absurdity with aristocratic pretension. Even her wardrobe-flowing robes, stark makeup, was designed to mimic feminist performance artists of the 70 seconds. Critics once dismissed Maud as eccentric, but Moore insisted every choice was rooted in research. The strange delivery wasn't random. It was satire, poking fun at the seriousness of elite art circles. It wasn't just weird acting, it was cultural mockery hidden inside a screwball comedy. The dream sequences were physically dangerous. The surreal dream sequences, bowling alleys transformed into cosmic runways, are unforgettable. But they were also physically punishing for the actors. Jeff Bridges had to be strapped into a harness and lowered down a giant camera track, simulating floating while wearing heavy bowling shoes. Choreographed dancers swung bowling pins dangerously close to his head. One slip, and he risked being knocked unconscious. The Busby Berkeley-style choreography required multiple exhausting takes under blinding lights. Crew members joked that these scenes were Hollywood on acid, but OSHA approved. In reality, they weren't fully safe. Bridges admitted he nearly twisted his ankle multiple times while sliding across polished floors. On screen, it looks like pure fantasy. Behind the scenes, it was a grueling test of physical endurance disguised as comedy. The Stranger was written for Sam Elliott's mustache. That cowboy narrator, the Stranger, feels like the voice of fate itself. But here's the kicker. The Coens admitted they wrote the part specifically for Sam Elliott's mustache. They wanted someone who embodied Western myth while also sounding like an old drinking buddy. Elliott balked at the idea, at first worried the role was too small. But the Coens told him, "It's your mustache that does half the work." Elliott agreed, later saying, "I just leaned on the whiskers." His laconic drawl and iconic look transformed a minor character into the film's moral anchor. Fans often forget he barely interacts with the dude, yet his presence frames the story. The Stranger isn't just a narrator. He's cinema mythology distilled into a mustache, a reminder that sometimes one detail can hold the weight of an entire film's philosophy. The bowling alley was a real A landmark. Those neon-lit lanes weren't sets. They were filmed at Hollywood Star Lanes, a beloved Los Angeles bowling alley that served the community for decades. Locals remember stumbling across the cast and crew while real games played in adjacent lanes. The dude's world wasn't constructed, it was borrowed. Sadly, the alley was demolished in 2002, despite protests from fans who considered it sacred ground. "It really tied the movie together," joked one activist. "Today, the spot is a school, but hardcore fans still visit the site like a shrine." What audiences see as a surreal backdrop was actually a living space for ordinary Angelenos, which explains why the film feels so authentic. Every crash of pins echoes not just through the movie, but through a vanished piece of Los Angeles history. Steve Buscemi hated being silenced, as Donnie's constant, "Shut up!" moments became comedy gold, but for Steve Buscemi, they were torture. Known for delivering rapid-fire dialogue in films like Reservoir Dogs, Buscemi struggled with playing a character deliberately cut off. He confessed, "It was painful to not speak." The Coens insisted it was part of the joke that Donnie was invisible even to his friends. The role tested Buscemi's instincts, forcing him to rely on body language and awkward silences instead of sharp lines. Ironically, the restraint made Donnie unforgettable. His tragic end hits harder precisely because he spent most of the movie ignored. Not dialogue, but absence. Not presence, but erasure. Donnie's silence reveals how even in friendship, some voices remain unheard until it's too late. The Nihilists were almost a real band. The leather-clad Nihilists Uli, Franz, and Kiefer nearly had a second life as an actual rock group. Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers already gave them musical credibility, but the Coens toyed with turning the characters into a touring band for promotional stunts. They even considered recording a punk single under the Nihilists' name. Ultimately, the studio feared lawsuits if audiences thought they endorsed arson or ransom plots. Still, the casting was intentional chaos. Flea improvised much of his manic energy, throwing himself into scenes with wild abandon. What audiences didn't realize? The Coens built the Nihilists to mock the absurdity of 90 Seconds counterculture, where punk nihilism was marketed as a brand. The characters weren't just villains, they were satirical mirrors of youth, culture packaging itself as rebellion. John Turturro's Jesus Quintana was nearly cut. Nobody forgets. Jesus Quintana, purple jumpsuit, bowling ball licking, menace wrapped in camp. Yet the studio almost demanded the character be cut, calling him offensive and unnecessary. The Coens fought hard, arguing his mere 2 scenes elevated the film's bizarre energy. John Turturro, meanwhile, built the character from scratch, designing the hairnet, the walk, even the bowling ball polish routine. He later admitted he begged the Coens for a spin-off for years before finally making the Jesus roles in 2019. Imagine the Big Lebowski without Jesus. It's unthinkable now. He isn't just a joke. He's a fever dream cameo that stamped itself into cinematic memory. So before we roll into Fact Hashin' One, go ahead and like and subscribe, because just like Jesus, this list isn't going anywhere. The Coens hid a Raymond Chandler homage in plain sight. The Big Lebowski wasn't just a stoner comedy. It was built as a parody of Raymond Chandler's hard-boiled detective novels, especially The Big Sleep. The Coens structured the movie so the dude stumbles through a plot he never fully understands, just like Humphrey Bogart's Philip Marlowe. Every clue seems meaningless, every revelation collapses, and yet the characters treat it like life and death. Joel Coen once said, "The plot is beside the point." Fans who watch closely notice that entire conversations echo Chandler's rhythm, but filtered through absurdity. It's not mystery, but parody. Not solution, but confusion. That's why the dude ends the film no wiser, but oddly content. The homage isn't hidden in detective tropes, it's hidden in the very fact that the mystery makes no sense at all. Jeff Bridges snapped photos on set to stay loose. While most actors obsess over dailies and blocking, Jeff Bridges stayed calm by photographing the crew between takes. He carried a panoramic camera and shot candid portraits of grips, lighting rigs, and co-stars lounging in costume. Bridges later compiled these into a book, showing a different perspective of the production, low-key, intimate, almost dreamlike. What audiences didn't know is that these snapshots kept Bridges anchored in the dude's laid-back worldview. Instead of rehearsing lines over and over, he documented the chaos around him, finding humor in small details. The act mirrored the dude's own philosophy. Don't stress, just observe. The photos remain a hidden archive of how the film looked behind the curtain, reminding us that great art often springs from moments of stillness in the middle of madness. Philip Seymour Hoffman stole every scene. As Brant, the Big Lebowski's sycophantic assistant, is pure comic gold thanks to Philip Seymour Hoffman. But what many don't realize is how much Hoffman invented on set. The fawning giggle, the nervous hand clasps, the overeager explanations, none of it was scripted. Hoffman transformed a minor role into a masterpiece of awkward comedy. The Coens were so delighted they extended his screen time, even adding close-ups to capture his nervous energy. "He's just so needy," Joel Coen said. The genius was that Hoffman treated Brant with total seriousness, never winking at the audience. Not parody, but sincerity. The result? A character so cringeworthy he became unforgettable. Audiences laugh at Brant, but they also recognize something painfully human, a desperate need to belong, hidden behind forced smiles. The ash scattering scene was brutal to film. Walter dumping Donnie's ashes into the dude's face is one of the most darkly funny moments in the film, but filming it wasn't funny at all. The Coens insisted on using real fine powder for authenticity, and the wind machines blew it unpredictably. Take after take, Jeff Bridges ended up coughing and spitting as John Goodman shouted lines inches from his face. Crew members remember Bridges' eyes watering so badly he could barely see. Goodman later joked, "We traumatized Jeff with talcum powder." But the brutality paid off. The scene hits because it's both slapstick and heartbreaking. Not just comedy, but grief gone absurd. The suffering behind the camera matched the emotional chaos on screen. turning a technical nightmare into one of the movie's most hauntingly human moments. The White Russians became a real cultural craze. The Dude's endless stream of White Russians wasn't meant to spark a trend, but after the film gained cult status, liquor stores reported a massive uptick in Kahlua sales. Fans began ordering Caucasians at bars, mimicking the Dude's sloppy devotion. Jeff Bridges himself admitted he didn't even like the drink, but he embraced the character's attachment for authenticity. It was just another part of his ritual, he said. Not a choice, but a lifestyle. The result? The Big Lebowski didn't just influence cinema, it altered cocktail culture. By the 2000s, Lebowski-themed bars, drinking games, and dudism meetups all featured White Russians as holy sacraments. What began as a character quirk transformed into a real-world phenomenon, proving that sometimes a movie doesn't just entertain, it changes what people pour into their glass. The Coens used real Malibu locations, not Hollywood sets. Unlike many films that construct fake worlds on backlots, The Big Lebowski leaned heavily on real Los Angeles geography. The Dude's shabby apartment, it was filmed in an actual Malibu complex known for its cheap rent and funky tenants. The supermarket scene with the infamous milk check, shot in a Ralph's in Venice, open for real business during filming. Shoppers often wandered into the background, confused by cameras. The Coens insisted on these locations because they wanted the Dude to feel like an authentic drifter in a living city, not a character staged on glossy sets. Not fantasy, but reality. That choice grounds the bizarre plot in a tangible world. The hidden detail is that the Dude's Los Angeles is the real Los Angeles, chaotic, sun-bleached, and wonderfully ordinary. The Big Lebowski himself was modeled on a real person. The wheelchair-bound Big Lebowski wasn't just fiction. He was inspired by Jeff Dowd, a political activist and film promoter known in Hollywood as The Dude. Dowd was a member of the Seattle Seven, which Walter references, and was notorious for his eccentric personality and love of White Russians. The Coens met him while promoting Blood Simple and became fascinated by his quirks. They exaggerated him into two characters, the rich Lebowski and the laid-back Dude. Dowd later embraced the connection, attending Lebowski fests where fans celebrated the film like a religion. What audiences didn't know is that the movie blurred reality and fiction. The Dude wasn't just a character. He was a reflection of a real man who wandered into the Coens' orbit and became cinematic legend. The film was a box office disappointment. It's hard to believe now, but in 1998, The Big Lebowski was considered a flop. Critics were divided, with some calling it incoherent and indulgent. At the box office, it barely made back its budget, overshadowed by bigger studio hits. People didn't know what to make of it, Joel Coen admitted. It wasn't noir, it wasn't comedy, it wasn't stoner film, it was all three. Not failure, but misfire. Yet the cult built slowly. Midnight screenings, VHS rentals, and internet fan clubs turned the film into a phenomenon. Today, it's studied in film schools and quoted endlessly. The irony? What once baffled audiences now defines an era of American cult cinema. The Big Lebowski failed commercially, but in the long run, it abides stronger than most so-called hits of the 90 seconds. The soundtrack became a secret weapon. The Dude's world feels surreal, partly because of its soundtrack. The Coens stacked it with unusual choices: Bob Dylan's The Man in Me, Creedence Clearwater Revival, deep cuts, even opera. Music supervisor T-Bone Burnett carefully crafted each track to reflect character quirks. The Dude's obsession with Creedence wasn't random, it highlighted his fixation on the past. Walter's scenes explode with militaristic tones, mirroring his Vietnam hang-ups. The result wasn't just background music, it was narrative fuel. Critics later argued that the soundtrack did as much storytelling as the dialogue. Strangely, The official soundtrack release left out several iconic songs due to licensing issues, frustrating fans. Not complete, but fragmented, just like the movie's plot. Hidden in the music is the film's true secret. Chaos can be harmonized into unforgettable rhythm. Lebowski Fest transformed a movie into a movement. In 2002, two fans in Louisville started the first Lebowski Fest, a bowling alley gathering where people dressed as characters, quoted lines, and drank White Russians. What began as a niche party snowballed into annual nationwide events, even drawing cast members like Jeff Bridges and John Goodman. The gatherings became so popular they inspired academic conferences, books, and even a pseudo-religion, dudism. Suddenly, The Big Lebowski wasn't just a film. It was a philosophy. Not fandom, but faith. People saw themselves in the dude's embrace of apathy, humor, and survival. The hidden detail? Few cult films ever leap into religion, but this one did. The Coens never expected it. They made a comedy. What emerged was a cultural lifestyle, one that still abides more than 25 years later. Saddam Hussein's bowling shoes came from a real rental counter. In the surreal dream sequence, Saddam Hussein hands the dude a pair of bowling shoes. Audiences laughed at the absurdity, but the prop was authentic. The shoes weren't made in a costume shop, they were rented from an actual Los Angeles bowling alley. The filmmakers wanted a touch of realism in the middle of the fantasy, and the choice makes the scene even stranger. A dictator handing over secondhand shoes wasn't just comedy, it was satire about power reduced to absurd service. Hidden in that moment is the Coens' philosophy. The world's most terrifying figures are often reduced to caricatures when filtered through absurdity. Saddam, the rug, the shoes, it all collapses into one truth. The dude abides, no matter how insane the world gets. In the end, The Big Lebowski wasn't just a movie, it was a cultural accident that transformed into a way of life. From obsessive prop choices to dangerous stunts, from real-world inspirations to accidental religions, every hidden detail shaped a film that still resonates. So, grab a White Russian, like and subscribe, and remember, when life gets messy, the dude abides.